All right, we are live.
We are live. Fantastic.
All right, and here comes Kate. Kate, can you hear us?
Yeah, I've joined on my phone.
Okay.
Yay, fabulous.
It works.
Good stuff.
Welcome. Welcome to Evolving HR's coaching for HR as a skill. Excellent. Hey. My name is Carol Fraser. I'm the de facto host because our host unfortunately got ill. So I will do my best to try to keep this puppy moving. And I will let everybody else introduce themselves before I introduce myself and ask the first question. So who'd like to go first? Angela? No, let's make Amie go first.
Cool. Thank you very much, Carol. So I'm Amie Nazaruk-Wheeler, and I'm really excited about the webinar today because I've also actually just spent 3.5 hours online this morning with a group of HR professionals talking about powerful coaching conversations in HR. So really excited for this webinar and all the questions and answers that we're hopefully going to share with you as well. And my specialist background is coaching, surprise, surprise, and coach training. So we've been leading coaching qualifications for 11 years in my business now. And we also specialize in leadership and management development as well. And I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Kate.
So somewhat still finding my way around on the platform here, but I am a creative executive coach. So what does that mean? It means that I tend to work with neurodivergent clients, and when it comes to working with HR teams, I can sit on either side of the table, either helping the HR person understand their neurodivergent talent, or working with the neurodivergent talent to help them understand their HR people, because for some reason, it's not the same language that we use. And I guess that's something that is really fascinating to me as a poet as well, that actually the communication can make all the difference, and how important coaching is in that space.
Very nice. Excellent. So my name is Carol Fraser. I'm the resident Yankee here in the US. I have been working I've been working in HR for 34 years. I've been working with HR professionals for about 20 years. And I too, similar to my lovely co-hosts here, work with HR professionals to help them move from the reactive to the proactive by using coaching skills and really changing their sphere of influence by being curious and just asking questions as opposed to being a people pleaser or fixer. So that's what I do. So we've got a couple of, ways to kind of get this conversation started. And if you are able to chat, again, we're all three of us relatively new to this platform. I will keep my eyeballs on the chat to see if anybody has any questions along the way or any comments along the way and bring that up. But I'll go ahead and open it up to my co-hosts. When we hear the word coaching, what does it really mean in an HR context? So, Kate, I'm going to go ahead and start to you. What does that mean when you hear that?
Coaching in an HR context, did you say? Yeah. It can mean a few things, actually. So, we are the masters of relationships in organizations, I think, whether people appreciate that or not. And coaching is the fundamental lubricator of good conversations, really, where there's learning and I guess resilience needed, and that occurs a lot in organizations, and usually HR are the people that people go to when they have issues or concerns. And much as we would like to be the fixers, for many people, we just said in the intro, really our greatest value is helping people work out the answers for themselves, work out how to be resilient through change. And so a coaching approach is really essential. But I don't think you learn that until you've actually been in a role and delivering in a role. It comes with probably 1 or 2 years experience that you think, well, there must be more to HR than this. And I was in HR for 25 years. So, yeah. Unless, of course, you love doing the admin, but then watch out because AI's going to be clipping at your heels for that job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just curious, what do you think, Amie, that we get wrong so often when we think about coaching in an HR context?
Oh, I've probably got a really good live example actually that we did talk about in the training this morning, because I think what came up for a lot of people is when people hear coaching, they tend to think about what is like pure coaching. And, I get a lot of people in HR say, but I don't want to be a coach. And I think one of the things that we can get hung up on is that there's a real difference between pure coaching, where you might buy in coaching services and that might be contracted coaching, or even where you do formal coaching in the organization, internally, where people have coaching sessions, versus where I think HR can really capitalize on using coaching is that in the moment coaching. So using it in the boardroom, if we're lucky enough to have a seat at the table, which we definitely should be, challenging people, but using coaching questions to challenge people. So rather than, just listening, or I think you use the term being there to fix things, actually being that person to challenge through curiosity and questioning to help people think a little bit differently. And I think we can get it wrong sometimes, thinking that coaching takes hours. I need to take somebody to a side room and sit with them for an hour and have a coaching conversation. And coaching in the moment for HR professionals is so different to that pure coaching. So I think that would be, kind of a big point for people to hopefully take away today.
Couldn't agree more, Amie. I recently as well did a group coaching for HR professionals. And the idea is flipping from the assumptive to the curiosity, having that, fear of always needing to know the answer, and just shifting that mindset for HR professionals that it's better that you almost don't know the answer so that you can kind of stay curious. And if you don't know the answer, instead of getting like this self-doubt, ask yourself, well, if somebody had to ask me that question, like, well, what's the question I can ask myself, or I could ask the room, that kind of allows everybody to go, that's a good question, and watch the little eggs crack open and, the omelet being made. Yeah, it's really a matter of trying to get out of the fear mode of having to know the answers. And in that coaching moment, being curious enough to be able to go, interesting, what could that look like? Or tell me what the next step on that could be. And really not jumping at potential answers.
Yeah.
I think that's just such a strong muscle in the HR minds to jump to conclusions to see however they can help, as if that is how they're worth.
And I think I'd go so far as to say, if you aren't taking a coaching approach, there's a real risk that you're not being neuro-inclusive, because what often happens for neurodivergent folks is that their first inquiry or question is misunderstood. And so there needs to be a real curiosity around the intent behind a question or behind somebody's problem. And really genuinely believe that inquiry is the first step. So, any kind of curiosity that can be taken there to make sure that the HR person has understood the need the person has, not the want, because they might ask for something they want, but it's not what they actually need. They need to go deeper. So I think it's really the first step in being neuro-inclusive is to have inquiry as your and curiosity is your first step as an HR professional.
Given how we, something that you said, Kate, which is, that admin will be eaten up by AI, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of that stuff that we're learned that has been the core of the necessary evil of HR, right? Somebody to run your payroll, somebody to do all the benefits, somebody to do, manage the systems. As we think now about what is the future of AI, of HR in the next even 18 months, months, right? Let's not even go as far as 5 years, just 18 months. Why do we need to help our HR professionals better understand that it's no longer a nice to have skill, but rather it's something that is going to secure or ensure that we actually have that seat at the table? Amie?
I think for me, in terms, because that's exactly kind of the phrase we use, it's not a nice to have. And I mean, from a couple of angles there, professionally, so people who are showing up today who might be CIPD members or who have done their CIPD qualifications. I actually shared with people this morning that the word coach and coaching shows up 19 times in the professional map. People don't realise how much coaching comes into play. But I think also, if we want a seat at the table and we want to be taken seriously as what we might call a strategic thinking partner, somebody who has great coaching skills is going to be better positioned to be a strategic thinking partner than just be somebody there who is there for advice or doing the admin stuff. And I think so it's looking at what different skill set people in HR can bring to the table. And I think some of the challenges also are how HR has been perceived over the years. So if we just look at job titles, for instance, again, this was something that came up this morning, typical job titles around HR, like HR advisor. Okay, so all I'm going to do is advise you. But actually, the role is so much bigger than that. And I think that's one of the things that, we as HR professionals also need to be pushing for, is that actually we are not just here to advise you. We do need that advisory hat on at times, but it's also bringing into play that level of, as I say, challenge, being able to ask those questions so that we can be that strategic thinking partner and not somebody that they just think, oh, well, I've got a bit of a problem, they're going to fix it for me. And also, I think kind of taking that a step further by positioning it in that way and by being more of a strategic thinking partner, we're also elevating other people's skills and capabilities in the organisation, because we're giving them an opportunity to think for themselves. So you take managers, for instance. I know, a lot of managers are knocking on HR door. What can I do? I've got this problem. I've got this member of staff. Well, the easy thing to do is to tell them in that moment what to do, but then they'll be back again next week. Yeah. And it's also not helping the managers by telling them what to do.
Yep. It puts that manager in the, it goes back to how we end up seeing that HR people are the ones who manage the staff when it's really the manager who needs to manage the staff. Yeah. And if we're constantly, that word advisor, when that came up, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it went from personnel to even human resources. Yeah. Yeah. And when that term advisor came up, or even when the term business partner came up, but they didn't give any outline of what that truly meant for the business, it still goes back to what was your personal experiences and tell me what worked and didn't work and tell me what to do. Never once has it ever been about helping others, from whether it be the lead line person all the way up to the CEO, to think for themselves. It's really, coaching, as much as the coaching environment has so many people out there calling themselves coaches. I am one of the people, and I would love to hear your guys' backgrounds, especially, if you guys are out there certifying people. I'm with the ICF, I'm with the International Coaching Federation, and it's like, you can't tell people what to do. It's against their ethics. Yeah. And there's coaches out there. I'm sure all of us have the story where we go into an organization and they're saying that they have a coach, and then you meet that coach and you say, great, what are you guys doing with them? And they're like, well, we're advising them. And I'm like, stop right there. Kate, what about you?
I quite like the term HR partner because partnership feels like it's an equal relationship. So, and it's a coaching relationship both ways. So I think the responsibility we've got as the senior, if we manage to get to the senior position through our careers, is that leaders are going to have to lead more than they are doing at the moment. And I think that we have usually the skills at that senior level to be able to coach our peers on the leadership team. So it's not just about coaching line managers, it's about actually role playing some of those difficult scenarios with your leadership team, so that together you're co-creating the solutions that are needed right now. Because not one person is right in all of this. It's about how people partner and work together. I think coaching skills are essential for that leadership role that we've got.
Yeah, so I love, you're not wrong. I think the word partnership is definitely, we all know that we create that co-relationship when we're coaching people. And it is incumbent upon us as coaches to stay present, right? And to ensure that, we're helping them towards that solution. But if we aren't partnering with them and we are just doing the advising or the mentoring or the consulting, those are telling moments. Those aren't asking moments.
No,
I totally get that.
And I think actually some of my experience is that leaders would rather have us being the people that update the plan and do the administration, because actually to be challenged by somebody, which is the role of a coach also, when they see patterns that are repeating themselves, or be the conscience in an organisation, then I think that's a really important role that we can't shy away from. We need to have the strength of belief that we're doing things in the right way. So you talked about, being a coach who's associated with an organisation. So my professional body is the Association for Coaching. It's really important to have a code of conduct that you abide by, that is not necessarily the one that's in the organisation, because you've got that oversight. As HR, you are, and I was at the CIPD conference last week, we are the conscience of the organisation, because even more so in a world of AI, where things can be misused, misunderstood, it hallucinates. We're going to have to help people navigate this world. We've got a really, really important role to play, and coaching skills will help us to do that.
So I had said something kind of off the cuff, but I'm really curious about what you guys are thinking. The difference between advising, consulting, mentoring, and coaching. Amie, what's your thought on kind of like how they either are separate? What does the Venn diagram look like with each one of those? What's your definition of each of those?
I think it's interesting you talk about a Venn diagram there, because ultimately they are there to support and help people, all of those things. But it's more about, I talk about, and you probably saw me doing it a bit earlier with them. And I love it actually because Kate's always got a hat on. So I could use Kate as a good example with your hats, because it is about what hat are we going to wear? Because there are times when we do need to advise and we need to tell, but it's knowing when that is appropriate, because there's a big difference between training, mentoring, coaching, counselling. Really, I always say you definitely shouldn't be doing any counselling or therapeutic work unless you are a qualified counsellor or therapist. That's something that but again, I know that is also something that is put on HR quite a lot when we're having to deal with personal and well-being issues in the workplace, but actually we're not appropriately qualified for that unless we have a separate qualification. And it's a little bit similar with coaching. Again, if we're being expected to do something, we need to have some form of training and underpinning knowledge around that. I think from a HR perspective, if we're trained in HR, it's easier to be doing the advising, and because that's what we've been trained to do. But then it's how do we step outside of that? Because there are links between training, coaching, counselling, consulting, all of those different terms, but it's knowing which hat to wear at which time. And I think that's probably the hardest thing. And again, I'll share something that came out from our session this morning. A lot of people are saying naturally they move into fixer mode. Because when people start out in the in the HR profession, predominantly that work at that lower level is more doing and advising. Whereas as we become more strategic, we need to, so going back to what Kate mentioned, and I think someone's just popped in the chat actually about being that conscience of the organisation, being that person who's going to challenge, our role shifts somewhat. And so it's almost like it's on that continuum, isn't it, of being directive. So for anyone who's watching, if you know anything about the Miles Downey coaching spectrum, so I'll pop that in there. So if anybody wants to do any research, have a look at Miles Downey coaching spectrum. But that moves from kind of real directive approach to non-directive. And I think what we need to look at is where are we positioning ourselves on that spectrum and what is appropriate for the given situation.
Situational coaching. That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly. Kate, what were you going to say? I'm sorry. So
the question was, where do we see HR kind of operating when it comes to advising, consulting, mentoring, and coaching? And these are all on the helping spectrum. And I think I totally agree with you there that if it moves into counselling, it's totally out of our remit. So it's knowing your boundaries. And when I first moved out of HR into pure coaching role, I'd often have on a piece of paper, right, this is HR's responsibilities, this is the executive coach response, and I'd literally write them out because I was still transitioning from one mindset to the other. And they are different mindsets actually as an external coach as to being an internal coach. So a coaching role for an HR person will look very different from an executive coaching role, I think, even though the tools and techniques may be the same, like the open questions, etc. So just written a little sort of cheat sheet here for myself. So advising, I think, is when there is a legal limit or threshold that the organisation is at risk of going over. You definitely need to be advising in that position, and maybe even, asking your legal advisor as an HR person. Consulting, we do a little bit of that in coaching, in that we agree what we're going to achieve. And this is where we're being strategic. What is the thing that we want to achieve? What we begin with the end in mind. That is a consulting approach. Mentoring is when we've got like knowledge that we need, that somebody can't possibly have had or got, but we have, and we can share that. And actually in my coaching practice, I'm not the sort of coach who sits there and goes, no, but if you did know what would happen, they don't know. So I say, this is mentoring. They don't know. I can't sit there and pretend. So I'll sit there and go, this is mentoring, or would you like to hear my experience? So it's that kind of not assuming the person is ready to take the wisdom of your knowledge. It's asking permission. So again, it's having that respect with somebody around the knowledge they've got, the knowledge you're sharing. And then coaching, for me, for HR, is about developing human potential. Now, that's a huge responsibility. And that's why I say it's not one that we do on our own. We do it in collaboration and partnership with a line manager. But to develop human potential is to actually acknowledge that everyone's got talent. And many organisations don't do that, sadly. They select a few people they're going to develop. But once you actually take the mindset that everyone has got potential, well, then you create an organisation that is growing, because as you grow your talent, the organisation grows with it, and that's sustainable. So I just think that coaching is the method by which you create sustainable organisational growth. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah, that's so perfect. It's helping our HR professionals who are listening and hopefully watching this even on a recording understand the differences of each one of those. I think is a first step in helping them better identify maybe where their strengths are with those definitions. Some people are going to feel way more comfortable or have the experiences of something that is more of an advisor from a legal mindset, right? They're going to have maybe something that they can lean into that's more of a mentoring. And similar to you, Kate, I literally do that hat thing when I'm coaching my people. I try very hard to keep it coaching until we hit that wall, right? That wall where it's like, I could ask you 1,000 questions, but there's just not enough knowledge in your head right now to even get creative, to even explore, in which case I will shift the hat. And from an ICF perspective, it's like, I kind of have to do that. I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is why we do that, isn't it? We having enough understanding of the processes that we are using, but then, helping other people realize the difference between them when we do that as well. Yeah.
What do you think might be a mindset shift that HR professionals need to unconsciously and consciously recognize when they're shifting to a coaching skills mindset? I kind of think of many people could potentially see this as, well, it's just training, right? It's just, I just need to train others on how to be coaching leaders. My opinion is that's not a complete sentence. There is, but it's the modeling, but it's a shift in the mindset of HR professionals. Given you guys have CIPD, we have SHRM. None of it actually teaches, what coaching is from practice. And you have to go off and pay anywhere between $5,000 to $15,000 to go get that done. What is everybody got a little jewel of what is a mindset shift that we can give to HR professionals who are listening?
There's some, for me, the mindset shift is that, and it's a really difficult one because organizations like to solve problems, and the mindset shift is not to be a problem solver, but to be an opportunity creator. And that would be the mindset shift I'd love to see HR professionals at the senior level move into. So creating opportunity. Organizations talk about risk management and compliance, and all of that keeps the organization operating, but it doesn't empower it to grow. Whereas if you're an opportunity creator, which is what coaching does, it kind of opens people's minds to different solutions and reframes how they see a problem as an opportunity. So that's the mindset shift I think we need to be encouraging HR people to get comfortable with. I just naturally loved it, but I know it's not everybody's preferred place to be.
Amie, what about you?
I think probably very similar to what Kate said there, but I think shifting that mindset of, because coaching is different to mentoring and to advising, it's that mindset shift of we are still helping people, but we are helping them in a different way. And I think this is the thing, because it's very easy to think, well, I'm not really I don't feel like I'm adding value or helping that person because I'm not telling them the answers. And this is the mindset, kind of shift there, is that we are still adding value, if not more value, because what we're then doing, and going back to what Kate said there, is we're empowering other people to really develop themselves, to develop their curiosity and their thinking and their ability to problem solve. The mindset shift of not thinking, I use that for, we've not got to be a walking Google. We do not need to have the answers for everything. And we need to shift from thinking that I'm only helping someone if I'm giving them the answers. If we're coaching someone, we're still helping, if not helping them more. But we're just doing it in a different way.
So the perception of value that an HR person might be holding on to. And look, some of us have been doing this for quite some time. The value is our very vast background and knowledge, right? And we've got a lot of people who are coming into the field now that don't have, they're not long in the tooth where they've got all this experience and all of the trauma, if you will, that HR goes through, from which to pull good answers. And so the idea of having a coaching skill for people who are less than 10 years, less than 5 years into their careers, it's a completely different approach that they could be bringing to what the field of human resources value really is. So if I do this exercise a lot with my clients when they have breakthroughs and they're like, well, what if I did X? My follow-up to that, and I'm sure that you guys know this practice as well, because it just gives it some teeth, is what does that look like? What does that sound like? And what does that feel like? So given that we want the HR people to perceive a different value we're offering, right, as a practice, what does that look like in practice so that we can give the HR people who are listening, like, oh, so that's what that looks like? Do you guys have any examples of what that kind of value looks like in practice?
I'm not going to go first on this one. So
you've got that there.
Well, I've got one, and as I say, for me, this session probably couldn't have come at a more timely manner because we've literally been talking about all of this stuff this morning. So in practice, this looks like, if we're sat at the boardroom table, we're sat in a meeting, what we are doing is we're bringing coaching into that, even just by asking the questions. So we're not necessarily there maybe just as a silent kind of partner in that room or there as an advisory partner. We are there asking questions. So if somebody comes up with a new idea, maybe there might be change kind of on the table in the organization. We add the value by creating thinking space, by creating time to reflect, because all too often organizations want to run at 1,000 miles an hour. And actually where we could bring value is by stopping that conversation and asking a question. And asking a question could be, well, actually, do we go with that change? Those questions might actually then help that other person who is leading that meeting think, oh, well, I'd never really thought about that in that way. Let's dive into that some more. So we add the value in that way. And as I say, that can be related to any particular topic. It could be changes on the table. There might be something else that's come up in the organization, and challenging people's thought processes. But I think one of the biggest ways in which we can bring that is by creating that time to think and by creating that reflective space. Because everyone is so busy. Everyone has, say, they've got no time. But if we keep, and this is why, again, when we think about change, organizations could spend weeks, months, years even working on something, and it could be the wrong thing because no one challenged them from the outset. So I think in terms of what that looks like in practice is using those skills to challenge people. As I say, whether that be in a meeting, whether that be related to change or anything else that's happening in the organization. So that's one example.
Okay.
So I'm going to take the approach that organizations are familiar with contracts. They understand what a contract is. And I think one of the things that really resonated with me in terms of coaching skills was to learn how to contract for a coaching program. And that is an incredible skill that if we had developed that between functions, say, so for example, between HR and IT, clear understanding of what each other needs and why and how that's going to be delivered, that contracting skill is a coaching skill. I know we've majored on the sort of curiosity and asking questions, but that clarity that's gained from agreeing what the success will look like in the future and, how that's going to happen is something between different functions around the boardroom table, is a skill that if everybody had more of would actually mean that we achieved more in the long run. So that go slower for me is about taking the time to contract clearly for outcomes. Very rarely was that done without some kind of an intervention in organisations. When I say that intervention, like an organisation development, working on the business rather than working in it. We need to have that approach more. So that's the skill I think is an immediately transferable, relatively easily understood by business because they do that with their customers all the time. It's having that same clarity inside the organisation as well.
Amazing. I love both of those. And I'll add my little 2 cents. Many times we aren't a seat at the table, unfortunately. And one tip that I've given many of my clients and has worked for me as well is adopting through that active listening and through the intuitive hearing, through the body language and through the emotions, the acknowledge and validate. Let's face it, leaders have to have a level of ego to be where they are, right? They had to have the strength and they had to have the conviction to get to that C-suite. I find that when I use acknowledge and validate, and for those of those people who are listening, what that means, it's acknowledging that you really did hear the issue and validating that how they're feeling about the situation is completely valid, because it is to them. And that's all that matters, is taking a moment to slow down by starting with, and I heard you, or even clarifying that, making sure that you heard it properly, and then giving them the attention that they're looking for, because they came to you with an issue, whether or not you gave them advice or you're going to coach them through it. You listened and you acknowledged where they are at the moment. Right there has proven for my clients and for me in general that it causes the pause to happen, because then they're like, yeah, that's right. Thank you. And I find that it opens the door to receptivity, so that I can now ask that question, right? They're a little more, if I had not taken 5 seconds to acknowledge and validate, and I jumped to advice giving, more times than not, they just shut you down because they aren't yet receptive. They're not actually listening to what's about to come out of you as good advice. They're actually like, well, who are you to tell me? It's like, and half the time we're sitting there going, didn't you walk into my office? So I find that for those listening, that is a tip that has worked for me even when I was beginning my coaching journey, because it's the first thing that we learn in our programs, is how to truly listen without trying to process what I'm going to ask next, so that you can properly acknowledge and validate. That one skill, that first skill that I learned on my path to being a certified coach, has been invaluable. And I always tell people, if you walk away with just one thing, just acknowledge and validate them, because then they will feel that they can come to you. And then the journey to listen to your coaching skills and what you're doing to help them grow becomes a quicker path to success. I don't know if that works for you guys.
Yeah, I think that really leans into the idea that a lot of people feel like they've not been heard. And, in that approach and those skills, then, that really means that they've been heard. You don't have to agree. I think that's a really interesting perspective, quite often in, maybe we're a bit more diplomatic in HR, but people think that, we have to agree with everybody's opinions. We don't. It's still valid for people to have a different opinion and work together. But being heard can make the difference between whether they then, are disruptive or not. Yeah. So, yeah.
I think it also creates an easier path for, like you were saying there as well, Carol, about if we've validated that and demonstrated to them that we've really heard them, that actually they are more willing to then engage in that conversation with us. And I think that's one of the other things as well, is when we think about really listening, going back to that point I made earlier, we're so busy and fixated on hurrying and rushing. And you mentioned that point of thinking ahead to what you're going to ask them. And I think, another skill in coaching is being able to really tune in to that person, really take the time to listen, and then, allow for that pause before we ask our question, because our minds, we might like to think we're good at multitasking, but we're not, and our brains are not programmed to be doing that. And actually it's about giving, ourselves that opportunity to create that space, so that we can, I think as well, because the quality of the question, it does impact the quality of the answer. And if we jump in too soon, that could impact that. And also it could damage that conversation. It could damage that relationship. That person doesn't feel heard. So I think that listening piece is vital. But through that really good listening and level of presence then enables us to ask a better quality question that's going to be more thought-provoking, that's going to lead to a better quality answer.
Yeah. So we've all said it in this webinar that it is going to be a mind shift for the HR professional to move from the advising and telling over to the inquiry and curiosity. What tips or skills or training have you guys had that helps the shift slowly move along? And I'll just give you kind of a for example. I have a friend who does improv, and she obviously is also a coach. And the thing that they learn in improv is that yes and moment, right? And it's interesting because in improv, it moves very fast. And it's still very directive, right? It's less curious because the idea is to keep the conversation going. What are some skills that you've used in the past that aren't pure coaching even, that might be that middle ground between HR and coaching that helps build kind of a pathway to a true coaching mindset?
Well, I did 2 years of improv, which was really good fun. And I agree. I think there's some really great principles that will help there, because I think every conversation is improv, unless you've scripted it word for word. And I think that's something we do in HR. We often provide managers with a script, don't we? And then, of course, the employee actually hasn't read the script beforehand because they never get to see it and they always go off script. So I think every conversation is improv. So I actually think that's really good training ground for anyone in HR. And then I did after that a year's stand-up comedy. Now, I'm not necessarily saying stand-up comedy is a skill to develop, although it can release tension. And I know that a lot of HR people are really quite anxious about humour in the workplace. You know, banter, it's sometimes called, isn't it? If it's the wrong kind. But humour can really just dispel or release that tension that people feel and just diffuse a situation like nothing else can. So, I mean, it sounds stupid to say go and do a stand-up comedy course, but I think I have told a couple of people to try it out, and they in my coaching actually, and they've really enjoyed it, because once you realise that you actually don't die if you do that, then it actually makes your presentation skills better. You learn a lot about how to be around a boardroom table and take the pressure of a situation like that. So there are transferable skills from improv and stand-up comedy. I was going to say poetry, but I ended up with those. So,
how about you, Amie?
That's fab. Well, sadly, I've not done improv, or I think I'm going to go down that route now. That sounds so interesting, and that comedy course as well. That sounds great. But yeah, we do kind of need to kind of have that humorous element, but I think also doing a lot of work on ourselves. I think one of the things that we're very good at when we work in HR is putting other people first. And I think to be somebody who is a really great coach, we've really got to know ourselves and do the work on ourselves as well. So I would say investing that time in really understanding ourselves, be that through, it might be through training, or it might be actually having a coach yourself to do that. But it might be using different tools, kind of techniques, anything really that is going to help you learn more about yourself. And when we understand ourselves more, that also might help us highlight maybe our triggers. Mm-hmm. And then we can start to learn, I've noticed this happening. So when this happens, what can I do to manage that? And that's another reason, actually, I'm a big fan of reflection. So you notice I mentioned this word reflection earlier. I think if you don't have time for a course, or you don't have the money for a course, I would say invest in, because I'm a real kind of stationery queen. I love stationery and stuff like that. And I've got more journals than I care to think about. But I'd get yourself a nice journal, and I would capture your reflections in that, and you will start to notice patterns. So we don't necessarily always need to take a course for that, and start to notice patterns and what are you learning about yourself from that. And then when we start to learn and understand ourselves better, we can apply that better. And that links massively to emotional intelligence, which again is a very important skill to have, to be emotionally intelligent and to demonstrate those behaviors if we want to coach well.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. I think one easy thing to do is get one of the emotional intelligence books. In the back of it, you can tear that out. You can do a free EQ test. Yeah. And you can just find out where are your highlights and lowlights, and then use the strategies in the book to learn more about emotional intelligence. I'm in the midst of doing a group coaching for leaders, but I'm doing my coaching skills for HR, and I've just adapted it for leaders. And I was really taken aback that there was a room of 11 people. Only one, the HR person, had actually taken an emotional intelligence course. Mm. And I think that the tools, if you've taken that course and you're learning how to adopt it as part of your acumen in showing up as the advisor, it would behoove you to see if you could bring that course to the leaders of the organization. Reason being is, again, just like Kate said, we're playing from a script that the leaders don't know. And if we can give them a tool that can definitely give them a leg up on even how to come in to talk to human resources, so that we can even get to that coaching contract and that relationship, I think one of the first things is that emotional intelligence, because that's where you're going to find the ability to be much more socially aware, which I think we're lacking significantly. It's one thing to know enough about yourself through reflection, but boy, oh boy, we are blind as bats in trying to figure out how to read other people nowadays. Mm-hmm. And to be able to do the acknowledge and validating, to be able to create that contract, to be able to even get the yes and, you have to be able to figure out where we have similarities and agreements so that we can kind of expand from that. So that all of these are very helpful. Hopefully the folks who are listening to this webinar can start to adopt one of these things, so that they can move their career from the operational, more reactive, to something that's more proactive and influential, because we know that just like we had the technology for people who are under the age of 40, we had a big shift when we moved to computers and we thought our jobs were going to go away. And it actually ended up expanding our jobs. Mm-hmm. And I think now, even with AI, and I know I'm hearing this from a lot of other consultants within the human resources field, how AI is assessed, implemented, adopted, and added into someone's role, and then how we measure it. Everything I just said has everything to do with the people. So while AI is technology, AI is actually going to change the human component of the business. So it's still going to end up falling on our shoulders, just like culture falls on our shoulders. It's still going to fall on our shoulders because it impacts the person. And guess what? We're the people, right? Mm-hmm. So is there any way an HR person can help to shift a company's culture to a coaching culture? Are there any catalysts that we can bring to kind of see how we can build that as a muscle in an organization as an HR professional?
So what I used to do, I say, before I knew about neurodiversity and the language we have today around that, I used to establish something called communication forums. And I think a communication forum is the first step to acknowledge that we all relate and communicate differently and have different needs. if not by function, but by responsibility and geography. So, you know, that is the first step, is to want to communicate better with each other. So I think the first step would be something like that, to acknowledge that many of the conflicts and differences in an organisation ultimately come down to how well we communicate with one another. And that's the first step, then, I think, to acknowledging that we're different, that maybe emotional intelligence will help us, and that coaching skills are a better way to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the communication piece, but I think also it's about how do we create an environment where people feel comfortable to open up and communicate. So one of the hot topics, and I'm sure, you know, in this space, you'll all be very aware of, is around creating psychological safety, you know, and how do we create a space where people can speak up? Because if we don't have that in an organisation, people, no matter how good they are at communicating, they won't, because they just will not feel safe to do it. So I think first and foremost, if we think about it culturally, you could train everyone in coaching skills and you could get everyone but then it's not going to work if you don't have the right. It's a bit like, you know, growing a plant, isn't it? You know, you can feed it loads and loads of water, but if it doesn't have sunlight, it's not going to grow. And if we don't have a space where there's psychological safety, and I think that for me would be one of the first things to start with, is creating a space where, and an environment in an organisation where people feel comfortable to speak up and are kind of not only invited to speak up, but when they speak up, and even if it's something we don't want to hear, going back to what you said earlier, Carol, we still validate that. We still show them that we hear that. We might not agree with that, and that might not be something that we can implement, but thank you. Thank you for contributing. Thank you for speaking up and for sharing, you know, your thoughts on that, and just making it a space where people feel that they can be open.
Very true. I think both of those lean into some of the issues that we've seen from leaders who just don't know how to connect with their people. They don't understand how different people, especially Kate, from your neurodiversity perspective, how to communicate on different levels.
Yeah.
And you know, Amie, with the psychological safety, I even partner with that, the psychological bravery of the individuals. Have we created the culture that even if some people say, no, it's a really psychologically safe place, I can totally say what I want to say, it's still the person may not be brave enough. And whether it be from a neurodiversity standpoint or a past cultural standpoint, or, you know, they're carrying around some terrible trauma from their parents. Who knows?
Yeah.
But you're right. It's all of those help to create a coaching culture. So that's good advice. All right, ladies, we're coming towards the end. Why don't you give everybody maybe a little piece of advice, how they get a hold of you, what you want to see as far as the future of HR when it comes to adding coaching skills, whatever. I'm going to let you do your own little 2-minute speech at the end. Amie, why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah, I just think that if coaching isn't something that you feel confident and kind of, you know, up to speed with, get curious about coaching, first of all, learn a bit about what it is. And yeah, there are plenty of training courses out there. I know, Carol, you do it, I do it as well. As I say, we've just delivered a powerful coaching conversations for HR course this morning. And if people do want to get hold of me, I am the owner and founder of Grow Development Solutions. But, you know, you don't even necessarily have to do a course. What I would say is, first of all, get curious about what it is and, you know, start your own journey by doing that learning.
Nice. Kate?
I'm going to lean into the neurodiversity angle because this is the thing that I'm really passionate about. So what I would say to HR teams is that coaching isn't something that you do only when there's a problem that you can't resolve yourself. So often people will in HR refer neurodivergent talent for coaching when they are at a performance improvement stage where things are kind of heading towards the end. So I would say coaching is for empowerment. And if you think of that, like I say, it's about opportunity rather than problem solving. Engage somebody in coaching to optimize their potential, especially if they're neurodivergent. So I'd like to see that shift. I'd like to help HR teams recognize that they can do that with their neurodivergent talent, because the support to do that through government bodies is not going to be there forever. So it needs to be built into the way we do things around here. If we're going to be neuro-inclusive, we're going to need to do coaching. I don't think it's one of those, I'll go into advisory mode. You will be dangerously discriminatory if you aren't ensuring that your neurodivergent talent have got some way of being understood in your organisation. Coaching is one of the best ways to do that. So I think that's the advice I'd give people, is do it because it's neuro-inclusive, and neuro-inclusive organisations perform 30 to 40% better than non-neuro-inclusive ones.
Very nice. And I'll chime in that, my piece of advice for HR people is probably harsh, but just quit trying to fix everything. Just stop.
Just coach.
It's not doing you any good. Because what ends up happening is everybody that goes to you to fix things, and then you grow yourself. So just stop fixing things. Put the toolbox down, and the one tool you pick up is how to be curious and ask questions. That's it. That's your new toolbox. It's a lot lighter.
Yeah, it is.
I think as well, to add to that, what we were saying though, but they can still fix things, but they fix things in a different way through coaching. So they're not doing the fixing. They're
helping other people.
Yes. Yeah. Good stuff.
I mean, look, I'm an avid learner. I constantly am taking courses over and over, positive intelligence, neuroscience, whatever the case may be, right? I love knowing more things, but the more I learn, the more I learn just how to ask more questions. And has it taken a lot of weight off my shoulders after 30 odd years. So hopefully for everybody here, I'm obviously tongue in cheek. Don't just stop fixing things. I don't want you to get fired. Just find different lens to look at what the word fix means. And yes, as Amie had mentioned, and Kate, we all have programs. And I think all of us had said at some point during this, if you put yourself through a program first, you're going to go through the roller coaster and the cycle of what it means to be coached, truly coached, so that you are absolutely embedding that feeling and that energy and that practice so that you can in turn go coach others. It's not an easy thing to just learn coaching and apply, because you don't understand the process that's going through the head and the body. If you do just that, and that's currently kind of where the HR field is right now. I learned, I apply. It's going through. Nobody ever human resourced you. You went out and got a degree or a certification, and then you went and did your job. Now, as being a coach, it's a completely different mindset. You need to go through the experience to really be able to understand how to coach others. And then again, display and embody and model so that leaders learn how to do that on their own with their own employees now too. So that's our webinar, ladies. Thank you so much. And we made it.
Yay. Thanks, Carol, for hosting, and great to see you, Kate, again. And I hope to see you at the conference next week.
Have a good one, ladies.
See you there.
Take care. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.